Well, hello and welcome back to the Dragonfly Daily, your source of fresh content on tackling the challenges of scientific imaging. I am your host, Mike. I'm Mike Marsh, the product manager of Dragonfly at ORS. I'm glad to have you back for another lesson on Dragonfly. Today's content and topic is advanced topics with deep learning. This is the fifth lesson in a row on deep learning. I think you're enjoying them. I think it's telling you a lot about how you can use deep learning to really improve and augment your scientific imaging workflows. As a reminder, we've already looked at how deep learning works. We've looked at different applications such as super resolution and denoising and image segmentation, a topic that really matters to everyone. If you're watching this on YouTube, find that red subscribe button, hit it and make it gray for me. I need lots of likes so I can make sure I can keep doing these videos and the boss will keep letting me spend time to do these. So hit a like if you're watching this on YouTube. If you are watching this on YouTube, or even if you're watching this live and you want to continue to watch it live, or you want to be able to watch it live, you want to switch from YouTube to live viewings, you do need to register, and registration is open again for the next batch of webinars. You can visit orss.ca/dailyr, that's a capital R, and that will take you to the registration page where you can input your information to register to watch live. When you do register there, you must give a name, an email address, and organization, so tell us what company or what school you're at, and you'll also have to give us the email address at that institution. Then we can get you registered and you can attend live. As I mentioned, this is the fifth lesson. This lesson is on advanced topics for deep learning. We're not going to do so much hands-on, but we're going to talk about some of the things that you can do with deep learning, some of the directions deep learning is going. So this is lesson 19, advanced topics with deep learning. We won't really be using Dragonfly 4.1, which is just to say we're not really going to do any hands-on exercises. We're just going to talk about some of the parameters and features you can control in Dragonfly for deep learning. We'll also talk maybe about some trends and where things are going. And we'll talk more generally about deep learning. And so this won't be so much a hands-on, but sort of things you can do and putting together some of the previous lessons in the week. Now, in Dragonfly, we introduced deep learning in June 2018, and at that point, we gave our users the capability of building new Dragonfly, or rather, new deep learning models, new convolutional neural network models, the ability to edit those models, and of course, the ability to train models and use and apply those models, or the inference stage. All that's encapsulated in a graphical user interface. Now, I say we provided all of that, but I should keep in mind, or you should bear in mind, that really there's sort of a 1% club. I expect 99% of my users to never build or edit neural network models from scratch. It's quite an arcane technique. I don't even know how to do it myself. There's a lot in the literature. There's a lot of really bright people that are doing amazing work advancing the state-of-the-art in deep learning models. And then there are 100 times as many people that want to use those models. So if you're in the 99% like me, you don't have to build or edit your models in Dragonfly. You're able to take advantage of reusing existing models. But that is to say, you can do it in Dragonfly if you are one of the 1%. Now, the trained models, once you have them in Dragonfly, they're accessible like any image filter. You can do a preview, whether this is for denoising or for super resolution or for image segmentation. You can do a preview on any slice, just like you might with an image filter, and you can put it into a workflow and call it and have it process an entire stack of images, just like any image filter. Also, with the introduction, we made it so that you can import models from Keras. So this is also sort of that 1% club. If you've written your own deep learning model and you've written it directly in Keras source code, you can import that model and use it directly in Dragonfly. And as I say, the models can be graphically edited. Now, that gave us the capability of our team to make models and others to make models, and the ability for anyone to use them inside Dragonfly. You fast forward about 6 or 7 months, in last year, so this is about 15 months ago, we introduced Dragonfly 4.0. We added some features. So there's a simple preview with an opacity filter that makes it very easy to determine for any data set I have. I might compare and look at the results of 5 or 6 different previously trained models. And then once I see the one that gives a good preview, I could hit the apply and apply it to the whole stack. We also introduced data augmentation tools, which I do want to talk about a little bit today. This can greatly help your workflow. The bottleneck for almost all of these experiments is not the computational time of training the model. It's very often the time in preparing the ground truth. And so if you have a data set that's difficult to segment by hand, that's the whole point you're doing this. You don't want to segment 1,000 slices by hand. And so I tell you, well, you need to segment 5 slices by hand in order to have a training model. Well, now with data augmentation tools, maybe you can get by with just segmenting 1 slice by hand and then using data augmentation to fake it or augment that 1 slice with supplemental slices. Now, we also introduced the ability to train models in Dragonfly with multiple inputs. The multiple inputs here could be, I have a color image, and so it's a red, a green, and a blue channel of information, or it could be an electron microscope experiment where I have a secondary electron signal and a backscatter signal. We will be talking about that sort of example in a lecture next Thursday as part of the CCEM workshop. Now, I do have someone that's raised their hand, so I'm just going to take a quick look and see if I are having any audio problems. Nope. All right. So we're not going to take any questions right now. We are going to wait until the end to take questions. So you were able to since 2019, since early 2019, the ability to train models with multiple inputs, such as secondary electron and backscatter electron. And as I was just saying, we will be presenting on that in the CCEM workshop on May 1st and April 30th. I think this will be introduced in the May 30th lecture. This is also, well, we'll talk a little bit more about multiple input channels in a few minutes. Now, as I showed in the super resolution discussion, you can upscale, or I don't know if you want to use the word upscale or downscale, but you can have different resolution or different dimension or matrix size for the input and output. So that was made possible in that release. And we also started reporting training data statistics after each epoch, so you can monitor and see if your cost function or your loss function is falling, so you can get a good idea of the progress of your training. We also made it possible for you to share models in Infinite Toolbox. So if you have a trained model and you've published on it and you want other people to use it, then they can. We're going to actually talk about the advantage of that when we talk about transfer learning in a few minutes. Now, then late last year, or maybe middle of last year, we provided an update in Dragonfly 4.1. We have provided the ability for you to generate new models from scratch. And we've been seeing that this week, where wherever I click the new button and I choose a UNet, it allows me to generate a new neural network model of UNet architecture, and it allows me to specify a couple of parameters. The different models have different parameters. You might have a UNet of depth 5 or depth 7, etc., but you can choose that when you initialize and create a model. So we've created more model generators in the upcoming release, and we even have a pattern where if you wanted to write your own model generator, you could. And as I was mentioning in the super resolution, we do have a model generator for the WDSR that did not ship with 4.1. We made it about the time we were shipping, but we could simply send it as an email, and you could put that in the right folder, and then in your list of models that you can generate, it would not only include the 4 or 5 you see now, it would also include the WDSR. We also introduced new loss functions, such as weighted categorical cross entropy, the dice score, etc. These are very useful in helping you evaluate image segmentation models. We also make it possible for your import of different deep learning models. You can now use custom layers and custom loss functions and take advantage of these evaluation metrics. There was also something that we introduced, and this is if you have trained a model with deep learning, you can take the first 1 or 2 layers of that model. Now, this is a highly abstract concept that we haven't really gotten into, so some of you may follow this and some of you may not. But once you have trained a deep learning model, those first couple of layers, they are the layers that do feature detection, and those features can be assembled into patterns that help you differentiate the different materials of your sample. Those feature detectors can be quite valuable, and they're learned as a result of the training. They're not engineered by a software programmer. Those models, those features can be quite useful. We have a tool in Dragonfly that we haven't shown yet. If any of you have ever used Weka from Fiji, it's a very powerful tool that uses random forest machine learning libraries for an automated segmentation. It doesn't use deep learning, but it uses random forest machine learning. We also have a method like that. We haven't shown it at all in this tutorial series. It's called Segmentation Trainer. And when you use Segmentation Trainer, you are able to tell it what filters should be applied to your image, and it interprets all of those filters and tries to identify the difference signatures between different materials of your image. How do those features or the feature vectors of the different materials stack up? If you use this feature that shipped in Dragonfly 4.1, you can extract those first couple of layers from a particular deep learning model, and you can use those first 2 layers as your feature vector. So rather than saying my feature vector is going to be composed of a Gabor function and a median filter and a difference of Gaussians, etc., you can actually use the layers trained in a deep learning model. So we're not going to get into that today. Maybe next week we can talk about segmentation trainer, but that is one of the features. So we've done a lot to keep the deep learning moving, and we're also, of course, introducing Dragonfly 2020.1 soon, which will have new features. So there, on that slide, I did mention that you can import neural network models. Now, for those of you that are doing deep learning research or that you want to learn more, there are a lot of resources online, a lot of resources. If you would like to learn about the different neural network architectures, a brief history can be found here, and it tells about how some neural network models were innovative and how they influenced the development of the field, and how other neural network models are derivatives of those. So what is a UNet, and what is a ResNet, and how what is AlexNet, and where do these come from, and what do they mean? So there's some interesting discussion there. You'll also find ModelZoo, which is a library online of different trained neural network models where you can learn about their architecture and actually use those trained models in different applications. You can look at those models there, and if you want to ask our team to implement them in Dragonfly, you could, or for that matter, you could use the tools and develop them yourself if you're part of that 1%. Or if you go and you learn and train yourself to become one of that 1%. So as I say, you can edit your model directly in Dragonfly, or you can write your model in Keras and import it. Now, the remaining topics for today, we're not going to cover too much more, but I am going to talk about the data augmentation and the advanced tools panels of the deep learning trainer. I want to give you an example of transfer learning so you can see what that means. We'll talk briefly about multi-channel segmentation. Then I won't be talking about Segmentation Wizard. We will be talking about that in the future when 2020.1 releases, but I will talk very briefly about multi-slice segmentation and feature detection. Now I'm going to switch over to Dragonfly interface so we can look at data augmentation and advanced tools. So if I'm in the Dragonfly interface, I can, of course, as we saw all week, I can go to Tools, Data Learning Tool. Here, I have a list of all of my models. I can always choose a model. For this case, it really doesn't matter what model I choose, and I can load the model. Once the model is loaded, you will have a view in the graph view, and this is for those people that understand the neural network architectures and want to see the organization and the layers. You can use the middle mouse wheel to scroll in or to zoom in as you scroll the wheel. You can also click Go to Editing, and you can see the attributes of any one of these layers. You can delete layers, you can create new layers, you can duplicate layers, you can do a lot here, but we won't be covering any of that. Now, what I want to talk about right now is the data augmentation panel. This enables you to take your trained data, that's a mistake, I don't mean to say trained data. When you do a training, you're always pairing an input with an output or an input with a target. And the target is your expensive image, and you may only have one expensive image because it took so long to image on the microscope, or if it's a denoised image, or one expensive image if it's a segmented image because it took you so long to segment. Data augmentation allows you to cheat and replicate that data. So if I have a 1,000 by 1,000 pixel output, so I've got 1 megapixel of target image, and I would like to benefit from 5 or 10 megapixels, you can use data augmentation. With data augmentation, it takes the individual, it extracts patches in a more useful way. So a patch can be extracted and it can actually be flipped horizontally or flipped vertically so that now that patch can be presented twice at the training stage and it can count for an extra observation, just like you had segmented another slice of data. You can also apply rotations or shears or scaling, and you can change the brightness, you can add noise, and you can even apply elastic transformation. Some of these were a little bit suboptimal in Dragonfly 4.1 when you were trying to use them for semantic segmentation, for image segmentation. They all worked quite well for the regression models. With Dragonfly 2020.1, we've made some improvements, so they all work very well on image segmentation. This means you can turn them all on and have a lot more augmentation. And so if you only have 1 megapixel of data, but you drag this bar to 5, now you can have 5 megapixels of training data. So the success of your network, how fast it learns, how far it will go before it converges, does depend in part on the training data. With this, you're giving yourself more training data. You're cheating to get more training data than you actually paid for. Now, The other thing I want to draw your attention to is on training parameters, there is an advanced settings. I won't be going through all of this right now. However, I think I do have Benjamin on the call. So at the end of today's discussion, if you want to ask questions, Benjamin can talk to you about this. You will see under advanced settings, you can change parameters such as the learning rate or the decay. You will also see that you can introduce callbacks that can tell your deep learning model it doesn't need to continue training. So you can have model checkpoint. You can also tell it to reduce the learning rate if it plateaus. This will dynamically adjust parameters that will help your learning continue in a more progressive fashion rather than having it stall out, requiring you to change the learning rate manually and then restart. You can also use TensorBoard, which gives you a graphical report showing you the progress of your learning on a graph, showing you how the loss rate is falling iteration after iteration. So those are some of the tools you will find on the advanced, what is it called? On the advanced settings for the training parameters. Now, I do want to talk a moment about transfer learning. Oh, that's multi-channel segmentation. Okay, we'll talk about multi-channel segmentation. So I will be giving, Nicola and I will be giving a lecture in the CCM workshop next week where we'll give an example of this. This will be an example. These data come from Nabil Bassim's group. A lot of you know Nabil, who's been doing SEM for quite a while. So Nabil's group has a PFIB at McMaster, and Ping Dong and Nabil and we have been looking at concrete samples, and we'll look at data that has noise and has curtaining artifacts, and we'll look at how we segment the different phases in the presence of those artifacts, but how we can benefit from having two channels of input, in this case, the secondary electron signal and the backscatter signal. You could also add information to your data set. Now this is, I don't have a slide, so this is going to be, you're going to have to use your imagination, but you could imagine a scenario where you want the training to be influenced not only by the signal, but maybe the distance. So suppose that you're interested in, I don't know, segmenting receptors, and they're always close to the plasma membrane. You could provide as input not just the bio-EM image, but you could also, if you had a membrane segmented, you could provide a distance map from the membrane. That could be an input, and then the network would consider that as one of the weights. And so it might learn that I never should look for receptors when I'm more than, I don't know, a couple hundred nanometers from the surface of the membrane. You can have lots of examples where you can benefit by encoding distance as a parameter in the input. Maybe we could have a special lesson on that. Now, I want to talk about transfer learning. Transfer learning has been described in the literature a few times, and it's been described in both object detection and in semantic segmentation. Transfer learning is when you're able to take advantage of a neural network that was trained on one data set to help you converge faster on another data set. What we've done is we've trained, for example, a model that can segment grains in rocks. We've trained it on a library of rock samples where it has encountered some carbonates and some sandstones, and it's even some shale rock samples, and it's looked at them at different scales. And we've trained that model to do a decent job at segmenting foreground grains from background pore space. Now, we can take that model and we could use it to train a new segmentation model on training data it's never seen before. So what we can do here is if, for example, the model has never seen some examples of Bentheimer sandstone, we can train the model that's already been trained on the Bentheimer training data, and we see it converges very quickly, or its accuracy climbs in the first 2 or 3 epochs. And that's compared to taking the exact same neural network architecture with randomized weights. It may take 20 epochs to get up this high, and we can look a little more closely. What you see is that in the early epochs, training or using a pre-trained model can get you to a high score very, very quickly. And even in later epochs, the model that does not have the benefit of the previous training data may never score quite as high. So transfer learning is the ability to take a previously trained model on a similar or reasonably similar data set and get faster convergence and faster learning. So this can be quite useful in speeding up your training. So there's nothing in Dragonfly that does this for you. This is just if you already have a model, you don't necessarily have to create a new model from scratch. The transfer learning can allow you just to reuse an old model and train it on the new sample. Now, I also want to talk about multi-slice segmentation and feature detection using YOLO, which stands for You Only Look Once. Okay, this slide is going to be on multi-slice segmentation. I've sort of mentioned this in the previous talks, but this figure kind of helps. If you have an input and you think that the software or the deep learning model should benefit by not only seeing what's on a slice, but seeing what's on the slice before and the slice after, you don't have to segment all three slices for your training data. You can say, this is the desired result for this slice, but I want the model, when it looks at this input, to also consider the previous and the following slices. That gives it some 3D context. So this is made possible in 2020.1 in that we enable multi-slice training. It's very easy. When you create the model, you can just click the checkbox for multi-slice, and then you can tell it if you want them to be sequential slices or separated slices, and it can be asymmetric. It could be this slice plus the following slice, or this slice plus the previous slices. Some of you should immediately be thinking about FIBSEM experiments where you have shine through or pour back, and you want the model to be looking at following slices to help interpret, is the pixel in this slice really a different phase, or is it just a shine through of what's in the following slices? So you can actually train your neural network model to consider that. So that's what multi-slice training enables you to do. Now, the applications we have talked about this week include denoising, super resolution, and image segmentation. One of the things that deep learning accomplished long before semantic segmentation was object detection. So in this field of view, is there a bicyclist in the road I'm driving on? In this field of view, is there a stop sign that I need to interpret and process? So identifying something in the field of view is different from painting the particular pixels of that object. So object detection is a popular feature of deep learning. We introduce object detection in Dragonfly 2020.1. We're using an algorithm called YOLO 3, which is based on the You Only Look Once deep learning model. This allows us to detect objects. You can specify this to detect 2D or 3D objects. It will box the objects. So if you're a cryo-EM worker, you may have seen a paper last year on cryolo, specifically for 2D boxing of particles in cryo-electron micrographs, which are notoriously noisy. Yes, so you could use YOLO, or you could implement a cryolo in Dragonfly so that you could do the boxing there. Now that's a 2D application, but Dragonfly's model also supports 3D boxing. And we've done that where we have, for example, done 3D boxing of kidneys in abdominal CT scans. It doesn't require as much training data as you would think, and the training data, of course, here is boxes. It is not the labeled pixels. So that covers everything I want to talk about. Just one more thing. We have talked sometimes about instance segmentation. We are exploring this. So this is some preliminary results we saw last fall, where we were able to take samples and try and do grain segmentation, so that instead of segmenting what is grain and what is pore, can we identify the grain boundaries and segment out the different grains? This is based on a paper from 2017 called Deep Watershed. So this is something that's under active exploration. So there are models in the literature on instance segmentation. So that's the terminology used sometimes to differentiate it from semantic segmentation. So this is an area of active exploration, and we will continue to pursue it. If you find interesting papers on this topic that you think are promising, please send them to collaborate@theobjects.com, and we're happy to discuss further collaboration and how to incorporate those models in Dragonfly. Now, that is it for today. So I know we didn't do much hands-on, but I hope you found that this discussion helpful to understand some of the advanced tools and techniques. Maybe you can start thinking about doing your own transfer learning. So I hope that was helpful. Now, I'm going to pull up the questions and answers. So what have we got? All right. So Lars says, please go through Segmentation Trainer next week, and he's got some thumbs up. Okay, well, let's get that on the schedule. I've got 3 lectures next week. I was going to do quantitative analysis, like objects analysis and slice analysis and measurements, thickness measurements. Wow, lots of people want to see this. Okay, the votes are in. We will include Segmentation Trainer as an example next week. All right, next question. I'm having errors creating my account for Infinite Toolbox in forums. Is this related to my software? So I do see there's a second person who says that they're having that problem too. So if you are trying to, so I know that we have a lot of people that were able to create accounts on the forums after this webinar series started. So it's not failing for everyone. So it is an issue with your system, but that doesn't mean we can't fix it. please send an email to support@theobjects.com, and we may have to investigate your log files to find out why you're not able to gain access to the forums and get your credentials. Gaining access to Infinite Toolbox, we can solve that in a separate support ticket. You should be able to create an account, and then once you have an account, you should be able to upload and download models. The next question, is it possible to train a model in a powerful workstation, then output the model and use it in a portable laptop? So yes, the laptop we won't have a problem. As Benjamin notes in his answer, the inference stage or applying the model takes less GPU memory, so your portable laptop will have to have an NVIDIA or CUDA capable GPU, but it does not need to be as big and hardy a GPU as the one used for training. I don't think we have documented anywhere how you can take that model and move it to another Dragonfly. It is simply copying a folder and putting it in the right place, or you could upload it to the Infinite Toolbox from one computer and download it to the other, but you might not want to do that because the Infinite Toolbox is publicly viewable. You can just send one email and we can answer to you how you can move the model from one folder from the folder on the source laptop, on the source workstation, to the same folder on the target laptop. Sydney asks, will you implement Deep Watersheds? Sure, Sydney, I can probably send you a beta where it's already implemented and you can try it out and tell me, we think it's not ready and we think it's not working good enough to ship, but maybe you can try it out and then give us your feedback. So we've implemented it, but we think it needs work, which is why it's not part of the production software yet. The next question, why not always use early stopping? I don't know the answer. Let's see if Benjamin is on and Benjamin wants to contribute. Let me pull up my participants panel, and where is the search feature? Search for Benjamin, and Benjamin is online. I'm going to click allow to talk. Benjamin, you are now unmuted. Do you hear the question? Sydney asks, why not always use early stopping?
Yes, in fact, it's a good idea to always use early stopping, but you need to select the good parameters so that the training does not stop too early. Or sometimes when we do some tests, we want to train for, let's say, 200 epochs for each of the tests. So in these cases, we don't use early stopping, but yes, it depends.
So in the transfer learning studies I was showing you, if you look at those plots, where's my mouse? If you look at those plots, you see there are sort of error bars. Benjamin has trained 5 or 10 networks each time he's doing these experiments, and because it's stochastic, you don't get the same answer every time. And of course, in these cases, he wants them to all run for a full 150 or 200 epochs, so he doesn't want to have early stopping. I think Benjamin just told us it might be a good practice to have early stopping by default. And maybe we can follow up with that later and maybe some more best practices. But there are cases where you wouldn't want to always use early stopping. Now, the next question is, on the topic of data augmentation, I find it unclear how the number of times you augment data relates to the features you ticked. Yes, I'll finish reading the question, but I think I understand. For example, if you ticked flip horizontally and vertically, and you set data augment one time, what does it do? Add exactly one patch per patch in the data set that is now flipped horizontally and vertically at the same time? No, it makes a random selection. So if you provide the checkbox 5 different times and you ask for data augmentation 1, then for all of the patches that are not being used for validation, they will all be randomly sorted into one of those bins and augmented. But the bin that they get sorted into could be different in each epoch. Benjamin, can you unmute yourself and confirm?
Yes, it is what you said. So for
okay.
If you have a data augmentation of, let's say, 5, you will have 5 augmented patch for each original patches.
Okay, I think that's clear. If not, ask a follow-up question. The next question is, learning rate will be changed only if it reaches a plateau, or if we have decay, if learning rate or can we have decay exponential in learning rate after every, for example, 5 epochs? Where can I set it? Benjamin, can you help me out here and tell me how to properly use the learning rate plateau feature?
Yes, I will put a link to the documentation. I'm not sure if we can do that. We usually use the patience, which is the number of epoch without any improvement. let's say if you have a patience of 8, then after 8 epoch without improvement, now we reduce the learning rate by a factor. But I will put a link to the documentation so that you can take a look by yourself.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Benjamin. Next question is, if I want to train a model to segment 2 different data sets, should I add both data sets and provide training ROIs from both? Short answer, yes. So long answer is there's a lot about deep learning, and there's a lot of the parameter space that hasn't been fully explored. So I wouldn't be surprised if someone comes along and finds data to prove cases where I'm wrong. But the short answer is yes. If you have, you can definitely train a network for a very specific task, like recognizing mitochondria in SEM micrographs at a certain magnification and a certain dwell time. Or you can train a better network that can recognize mitochondria under multiple conditions, but you have to have multiple impressions during the training cycle, or you have to have impressions from the different and disparate training cases. So, for example, I think within 1 year, somebody, maybe it'll be us if you want to collaborate with this, I think within 1 year, someone will have a mitochondria detector, and it will be as robust as you or I are, and it will work on SEMs and TEMs of all different images. But what it requires is a large, diverse training set. So if you want to participate in that and you're already imaging mitochondria and you've got dozens of micrographs, send them to me and we'll write a paper together. So that's the sort of thing I think we'll have within a year. I think we'll also have within 1 to 2 years the ability to recognize cracks in samples, and it won't matter if, in fact, there's already been a paper published on this where people took photographs of ceramic tiles, and then the photographs were under all sorts of different conditions and lighting conditions, but you had diverse training data going into the network, and so it did a very good job of recognizing cracks in test and validation data sets. Next question is, if you do transfer learning and train a pre-trained model on a new data set, does it update the original model or does it save as a new model? It updates the model. There is a duplicate button, as Benjamin refers to. You can duplicate the model if you want to leave the original one unchanged. Next question is, multi-slice training will be very helpful in 3D fluorescence imaging of cells and tissues. Yeah, so we should actually, someone should implement a confocal deconvolution as a 3D neural network model in Dragonfly. So I'm sure that's been described in the literature, and I submit that it's going to be just as good or better than using the standard methods for deconvolution, where you image a bead or a small point and measure it empirically. Sorry, I got off on the tangent of deconvolution, but yes, it will be helpful. In fact, I didn't even say this, but I think in all or in nearly all cases, the success of the network actually improves if you do a multi-slice training instead of a single slice training. So that raises the question, why not do when would you ever not do multi-slice training? Well, if you don't have good 3D context, so if your slices are not closely spaced in 3D, you might not gain any benefit. And it does slow down the training and the inference. It requires more memory in the graphics card as well. So, but in general, I think we're going to see a trend where everyone moves to multi-slice training as a default. Next question. Can you use deep learning to do object separation by showing manually well-separated objects in a network? Can this help when watershed type of separation doesn't work well? So you can't, it doesn't work as well as you would like. So you could say, instead of giving it segmentation of just these are grains and this is air, can I give it these are segmented grains and this is air and expect it to succeed? It doesn't work so well. I mean, you could try sort of the inverse. You could try labeling just the grain boundaries and doing a network that has 3 phases: grain boundaries, grains, and background air. That would probably work a little bit better, but it doesn't do as good a job as some of these instant segmentation algorithms. Next question, can you use YOLO to identify a structure and then use automation to crop that structure out of the image? So, well, that is the obvious pattern. I don't know that we have done that in Dragonfly. Let's see. Benjamin, or if Nicola is online, somebody take a note. We want, of course, to be able to have a workflow where you can choose after running a YOLO and having all the box outputs to automatically apply the crop and have a new stack of cropped particles, either in 2D or 3D. I'm sure, I mean, obviously we've thought about it. It's the obvious workflow, but I don't know that we've implemented it. I don't think we have implemented it yet. Next, Jan asks, I would like to learn more about separating and labeling with deep learning. Do you have any examples or papers and further resources? Have a look at that Deep Watershed paper, this one here. Have a look at that one, and then follow the citations in Google Scholar for the papers it references and the papers that reference it. That's probably a good direction to look. Next question, is instance segmentation possible at this point if you paint cells with a smaller region? Well, that's an interesting idea. I'd like to see the results of that. It would certainly require more effort on your part on doing the training data. So you could, in individual 2D slices, paint just the interior and leave the exterior unpainted. That's very similar to the way I answered Aya's question, except I think it would be easier for you to paint the boundaries than to paint the core of the grains. I don't predict that you would get good results, but I don't always make the right predictions. So it's certainly an experiment that is not that time consuming to try. Two more questions. First, is there a constraint in how the scans, previous and new, were done for doing transfer learning? A constraint. Oh, no. We're using a very large ROC library of scans done by several different laboratories with several different CT scanners at several different magnitudes, and the test data that we presented was from a new data set altogether. So the transfer learning is not working under a highly constrained situation. It's actually, the constraints are extremely relaxed. Next question. Please go through the parameters used to determine early stopping. Benjamin, if I pull up that panel now, I'm going to unmute you. I think I can unmute you. Maybe I can't. I'm going to go to that panel, and you can tell me if you want to answer that. I don't think we have Benjamin on the line anymore. So Benjamin said he would put a link in here discussing doing the learning rate changes. As far as the other early stopping parameters, I'm afraid I can't answer it. I don't know the details of this. So I suppose the best way to follow this up, okay, well, there you go. Let's use that, and then if you want to ask a follow-up question on one of the future webinars, you can. Have a look at the link Benjamin provided, keras.io/callbacks. This will define all of these parameters. So you see all of these are marked as callbacks. This is not engineering on our part, or this is not feature development on our part. A lot of what my team does extremely well is just take the existing tools, which are quite strong, and do software engineering to make it accessible to you in a user-friendly interface. So in this case, most of what we're doing are not developing new features, but simply doing the software engineering. So you can find those features documented in the source project, specifically at the Keras website. That is it. We're going to call it a day. So thank you for your attention. Do go on and register orss.ca/dailyr with a capital R so that you can be registered for the future webinars. And we look forward to seeing you next week, where we'll talk about some of the topics on quantitative analysis, and also a lesson on segmentation trainer. And then on Thursday and Friday, there will be no daily, but you can register for the CCEM workshop that we talked about. I'll try and put another link in the YouTube description of this video. So that's great. Everyone have a good weekend. Stay healthy, be good, and we'll see you next week.